Good evening all and welcome. Before we get settled in with the Stalkers, I'd like to share an announcement. Over on my Patreon we are having a bonanza. I'm posting content every other day, a bunch of exclusive stories. They're gonna be good until the promotion ends in about a week and a half. Also, for everyone who joins the Black Eyed Kid tier, you get access to the 24-hour video I made that was divided into two by YouTube, thanks, as an MP3 download for you to listen to wherever you want. So if it interests you, please check out my Patreon in the description. Your support goes a hell of a long way, and I appreciate it immensely. But that's it from me, because the Stalkers are waiting. So check your back, and let the darkness take control. When I was 12, I was walking to my psychiatrist for my weekly appointment. It's a half-hour walk after dark, and I enjoy walking, especially after dark when things were quiet, peaceful, and slow and no one else was around. I didn't live in a dangerous neighborhood, nor did my walk take me through any dangerous neighborhoods. As I'm about halfway to my destination, a car, a Cadillac, comes driving down the street. Some people, both male and female, were in the car, sticking themselves halfway out the window and taunting and jeering at me as they drive by. They were a bunch of teens in their early 20s and such, and I ignore them and keep on walking. About a minute or two later, the same car comes down the street again, and those people are jeering at me, taunting me again, and I don't know who they are. Maybe they live in the neighborhood. I still ignore them and keep walking. Another minute or so goes by, and again they come driving down the street, taunting and jeering, and now I'm worried. They're circling the block over and over, deliberately focusing on me. As soon as they reach the corner and make the turn and are out of sight, I duck behind some bushes in someone's front yard and wait. The car comes again down the street. This time, not seeing me walk down the street, they're not jeering. They pass right by me in my hiding place and turn the corner. They think I finally reached my destination, one of the houses on the block, and went inside as a result and driven away. But I thought wrong. Stupidly, I leave my hiding place and go back to walking on my way to my psychiatrist. But I should have stayed in those bushes much longer, because that's when I hear the car approaching. They spot me and start it all up again. They turn the corner. This time I run towards my destination, but I know I won't get far before the car and those kids catch up with me again. So to that effect, I decided to hide behind the bushes in front of an apartment complex, this time resolving to stay there for a good while until the thugs in the car give up their search for me. I'm hiding in the bushes for not long, maybe 30 seconds, and when a guy of those apartments pops out from his apartment, asking why I'm hiding in the bushes. At first, he probably thinks I'm a burglar or something, but I explain to him how I'm walking to my psychiatrist and how I'm being followed and harassed by a bunch of kids in a car, which is why I was hiding. The guy can instantly tell from the tone of my voice and facial expressions that I'm telling him the truth, and can see how scared I am. Just then, the car comes down the street and pulls right up at the curb directly in front of us. They look at me and the guy I'm with. Not a mean-looking guy in his late 30s, but tough and serious-looking enough. He's not wearing a shirt, but he's wearing a sleeveless undershirt, which reveals that the guy's upper body is very well toned and muscular. I'm looking at the car and realize it's missing a few people from inside. It doesn't look so full now. The guy I'm with just gives them a mean stare and asks, "Do you know them?" I explain to him that I don't. Just then, as the car is sitting there, about 3 of them approach walking from the other direction. The car was traveling east to west, and those 3 were walking on foot, so west to east. That's why the car didn't seem so full. They were looking to escalate the situation. They weren't satisfied with just driving by and taunting me. They changed tactics. A few of them got out of their car up ahead and started walking towards me while the others in the car took another turn around the block. Their plan now was to physically trap me in between them and their car, perhaps grab me, drag me into their car for whatever reason. But seeing my tough guy guardian angel with me, the kids walking towards the car instead got into the car and it took off. The guy offered to stay with me a little longer, or if I wanted to duck into his apartment and stay there until I was sure it was safe to continue on the journey. I had a feeling that that was the last I was going to see of those guys in their car, and I didn't want to be late for my appointment, so I thanked him for his offer but declined, and decided to head on my way. The guy returned to his apartment and closed the door, and I looked at the closed door and hoped that I hadn't made a mistake by turning down the guy's help for better safety, because I was still afraid. But thankfully I was right about not seeing the car again, and the rest of my walk was unremarkable. I reached my psychiatrist's office, told the therapist about what happened, and he insisted on calling the police. The police came and took a report from me, and that was the last I heard of it. On my way back I usually took the same route that I came up, but this evening I varied my way home, taking some different side streets to walk on, and I never saw that car or the thugs again. This happened after I went to university. I was 18. I made an effort to make friends after I moved onto campus and ended up with a few friend groups to hang out with, including a new girlfriend and plenty of people from my class that I liked well enough. There was one class before lunch where it was traditional for people to go to the cafeteria afterwards to eat in pairs or threes. I wasn't very discerning about who I'd have lunch with because I got on fine with most people from the class, and we were all trying to make an effort to be social. So when one girl, Lily, asked if I wanted to eat lunch together after that class, I didn't have any reason not to go. We spoke about school and that kind of stuff, nothing particularly noteworthy, but she did ask me to get lunch with her again the next week, and it became a pattern. And there wasn't exactly a way of starting saying no. It became a pattern, and there wasn't exactly a way to start saying no suddenly. It was fine, but it did mean I lost the chance to eat lunch with anyone else on those days, which in hindsight I suppose was the point. One day in class I asked someone if I could add them on social media. This happened in front of Lily, and I saw her face jerk towards me from a few seats over. It was such a sharp reaction that it was hard to ignore, and I still remember it. By the time I got home later that day, Lily had sent me a friend request. No friends in common. Dunno how she knew my last name. It was a bit of a surprise, but I guess she just dug through the university's social media pages and found me through there. It gave me a bad feeling, but surely it was fine. She ended up messaging me a lot and commenting on anything I posted. I told myself she was just awkward, and we became friends, if not close. I'd known worse people. She still always got me to go eat lunch with her after one of our shared classes. Other than that, we rarely spent time together in person. I saw her around sometimes, but I never went out of my way to hang out with her. So it was mostly online messages and seeing each other in group settings. Coincidentally, my girlfriend was also called Lily. This was something that clearly bothered Lily, not my girlfriend, who couldn't have found it less interesting, and she occasionally hinted that she wanted my girlfriend to pick a different name or joked about her not suiting it. She clearly didn't like my girlfriend at all, and I had an idea of why. It was hard to ignore at this point. Lily was starting to unsubtly hint that she had a crush on me. I tried not to address it, because what was I even going to say? I've never known what to do when a friend makes a pass at me. I also was not interested in the slightest. Even ignoring the weird stuff she pulled, Lily wasn't my type at all. She tended to dress and act in a way somewhere between a 50s housewife and one of those adults who's still obsessed with Disney princesses. Things took an uncomfortable turn on the day of our last shared class of the year. Instead of asking me to lunch like she usually did, she asked if I would go on a walk with her. Again, I didn't exactly know how to refuse, so I said all right. Our campus was bordered by a large patch of woodland, and Lily led me into the woods, and the sounds of our fellow students slowly faded away. She sat down on a log and I joined her. and she started talking about how she was going to miss me over the summer. I tried placating her, but I didn't want to be there, especially because she seemed almost on the verge of tears. I think I tried to make an excuse about having plans with my girlfriend before I could leave. Lily chose to kiss me without warning. It was uncomfortable to say the least. I got out of there and was happy to think that I wouldn't see her for a while. I came back to the university after summer, moving into a house with friends. There were some serious issues in my friend group though, a lot of petty arguing and worse. I broke up with my girlfriend around the start of that school year as well, and basically the whole mess made me recontextualize things with Lily, because it suddenly didn't seem as bad. That said, I didn't want to be alone with her. We mostly spoke online, and she was still constantly messaging me after all. One upside of everything was that I started dating a boy. Lily was not pleased to hear the news. I think she hoped to sneak in after I broke up with my girlfriend, but as I said before, that was never going to happen. There wasn't a big gap between my breakup and this new relationship, so she must have thought she missed her chance with me. This is when the story gets bad. At this time, I was fairly active on Tumblr. I occasionally talk about my life and mostly reblogged photos and stuff. I was on there one day when something odd happened. One of the blogs I followed had received an ask with some phrases I recognized. It took a second to register that it was taken from my About page. That made me freeze. I read the message properly. Someone was asking this completely random person to analyze this section of text from my page, asking for their opinion on the type of person who would write it. I cannot stress how messed up it was to see people talking about me like I was a character in a book they were trying to study. The reply was basically, "Sorry, I don't know." But the important thing was that the question hadn't been anonymous, it was linked to someone's blog. Obviously, I wanted to know about who had taken such a bizarre interest in me. As far as I knew, no one in real life other than my boyfriend knew about my page. Or no prizes for guessing who was behind it. What I found was a shrine. She was using a fake name, but I recognized Lily all over that thing. It was the cutesy pink and red page. There were few posts about her interests, but most of the context was focused about her primary interest, me. Most of the posts were about me. There were accounts of things I'd done recently. He told me such and such. He went to a nightclub recently, as well as references to things from as far back as I'd known her. It was clear she'd been keeping tabs on me both on and offline, gathering up every scrap of information she could about my life and hoarding it here in her collection. She talked about us eating lunch together and how special our dates were, as if it had been anything more than acquaintances getting food after class. She talked about the time she had forcibly kissed me in the woods, but she wrote as if it had been mutual. She quoted lyrics from my favorite song and talked about how she'd always be there for me, no matter who else came into my life. Lots of references to loving me just the way he is, which answered another mystery about an anonymous love letter I'd received earlier that year with the same wording. It got worse. There were a lot of posts about my boyfriend too. These weren't so nice. They got vicious, talking about how he doesn't deserve me, how he didn't know what he had. If she were with me, she'd be jealous of anyone else who came near me. So my boyfriend not being a jealous person meant he couldn't love me. It was angry and hateful. I didn't like to think about the sort of person who could write so obsessively being fixated on me. One thing that didn't make sense at first was that the blog also made plenty of references to Lily's best friend, Stephen. She had never mentioned this person to me. Her posts spoke about Stephen a lot, and how great a friend he was, and how much fun they had together, and how he looked out for her. I was trying to work out whether this was an online friend, when one specific post made it all click. She had posted a photo and captured it with, "Stephen sent this to me. He knew I would like it, and I love it." The problem was the photo was taken from my own page. I hadn't sent it to her. She took it from my page and then claimed this fictional best friend of hers shared it with her, because in her head, she'd split me into two people. In her messed up fantasy life, I was both the perfect best friend who was always looking out for her, and her soulmate who was bound up to end up with her once I finally got over my sweet, kind boyfriend and all these other easy girls I hung out with that she made dozens of posts complaining about. Who was she complaining to? Oh, Lily had an audience. She had open questions about me and her relationship with me and got messages back from her followers. People who took what she said at face value. I saw a bunch of random people agreeing with this stalker that my boyfriend didn't deserve me and we were bound to break up soon so I could be with Lily, the person I was clearly supposed to be with. She had this fake, fan fiction version of my life for anyone to share their opinion on, and she'd made herself out to be the hero of it all. I went maybe a month back into this page's history. I didn't look at everything, there was simply too much. I'm not sure how long it had been going on for. I sent Lily a message confronting her about the blog, and she said nothing. I cannot stress how weird it was to have found a page and pages dedicated to me, with her talking about how she was in love with me and how she would ensure we ended up together, slamming my boyfriend, building a fantasy life with two versions of me in which she clearly believed to be real, then acting out like it had never happened. She said nothing. She didn't address it. She just changed the subject even after I pushed it, and it was like it hadn't even registered with what I'd said. I've never seen anything else like it. Of course, she eventually deleted the page, or at least changed its name to hide it, so I never found it again. It wasn't the end though. I wasn't going to hang out with her anymore, but we were still shoved together in classes, and she had started to actually scare me with what she might do next. I'm kind of a paranoid person, knowing someone was obsessively keeping track of me for who knows how long. It freaked me out. The next thing she pulled was trying to seduce my boyfriend. It was an absolutely useless attempt that only made him feel uncomfortable, and he told me about it right away. What was her plan there? Did she hope to tell me he cheated and wait for me to break up with him? Why would I want her after that? When that didn't work out for her, she tried hitting on 3 of my other friends, and none of them took the bait. She ended up dating one of my former housemates for a while, but made sure to send me messages while they were together to let him know that she'd rather be with me. No thanks. Lily made sure to stay in my life the whole time I was at university, and she ended up starting rumors about me and damaging a career opportunity I'd put a lot of work into. I don't know what else she did behind my back, but it made me realize it was safer to let her think she was a part of my life while ignoring her, rather than doing something that would make her angry. After I graduated, Lily still wanted to spend time together, but I knew now I didn't have to. I made excuses of work and barely talked to her after a point. I almost entirely stopped posting on any social media accounts that I knew she knew of. But of course, she didn't give up that easy. She tried to start conversations, asked me to meet up with her, attempts I usually ignored, but I didn't like to think she was still tracking me online, but she probably was. I don't know how, but she'd occasionally reference things I mentioned online somewhere she shouldn't have known about. The last time we had a real conversation, she sent me a message out of nowhere. We hadn't spoken at all in months, and we hadn't talked about anything serious in much longer than that. Thinking about that conversation makes my skin crawl. At first, she asked me some questions about how long I'd known I was queer. I told her some basic stuff, the kind of things I'd tell anyone who asked. But then she changed the subject. She started talking about how I would feel about her if I was a boy, about wanting to be a boy for me. The messages quickly became fetishistic. She went into plenty of detail about fantasies she had about the two of us. Again, we were not friends at this point, we'd never been especially close, at least not from my perspective, and we had barely spoken for years. I can't imagine sending messages like that to even a close friend, let alone someone who barely knows you. I tried telling her not to pull this crap with me, but she decided to change tactics. She sent photos of herself followed by a bunch of messages, maybe 4 or 5 minutes, way too fast for me to reply before the next one arrived, basically quoting back what I told her about myself and my past earlier. She was telling me these things as if they had happened to her. She was role-playing as me. The worst part was that she seemed to believe it was real, that those things actually had happened to her, even though she was quoting me word for word, things I'd told her only hours before. It was like she was trying to absorb my story, to take over it, to make my life part of her. Yeah, I didn't want to talk to her again after that. I ignored future attempts she made to speak with me, and I eventually silently deleted her from the inactive social media, which was her only way of reconnecting with me. I really thought she might finally move on. But a few days ago she sent me a friend request. It's sitting there unanswered because I know if I'll delete it she'll only send another. Lily and I met nearly 12 years ago now. This story is just the highlights, and even then, it's only the stuff I know about. A lot happened behind my back. And to the girl who spent 12 years obsessing, fetishing me and stalking me, I'd rather your fantasy life stay in your head and we not see each other anytime soon. My high school counselor was a creep and a stalker. This took place in the 80s. I'm Japanese and Hispanic, and when I started high school I didn't know a single word in English, and speaking in either Spanish or Japanese was frowned upon. So I relied on my school counselor, as he was also Hispanic and was very kind, friendly and helpful and attentive. Mr. Miranda was a short, stubby, wrinkled man in his 60s with deep stained yellow teeth, a thick, bushy moustache and awful breath. He wore thick Coke bottle glasses and was always finding reasons to pull me out of class, or he would wait for me to end my school day. The funny thing was, he always knew where I was. He would take me to his office and would close his door and often lock it. Most of the time, he complained about his kids and how he hoped his kids were as studious as I was. He would always say how beautiful I was, how smart I was for being able to start high school a year younger than typical Americans, and I would just awkwardly reply, "Gracias," or nod my head respectfully. At first, I didn't sense anything wrong, but slowly I felt uncomfortable going to his office for conversations that had nothing to do with my progress as a foreign student, and the way he would pick my chin up with his cold, hairy, nasty hands with long, bony fingers and would salivate by complimenting my full lips and my Asian eyes. I was most definitely not trying to get too close, as I avoided his nasty, smelly breath. It was horrendous. If you're familiar with the smell of an animal's corpse, imagine that, but worse. Often a misty shower would escape from his mouth, and depending on how close he would cowardly corner me, would end up on various parts of my face. I was young, naive, and very cute in a new country, and wasn't sure if this was normal behavior for a high school counselor. Mr. Miranda would get unusually close. Somehow he had a thing for my hair, and would either touch it or smell it. When that occurred to me, I would back off, and he would sound offended, and complain that I wasn't humble anymore, and the American culture wasn't for me. Not knowing who to tell and what to say, I endured being his prey for a little longer. I had been taught to respect my elders, and to do what was asked of me no matter what, with no questions asked. The touch from this grotesque man bothered me. It made me grind my teeth. I wasn't used to being touched. My mother was the only one who did it once in a blue moon with a hug. I had just become a member of an extended family, and I didn't want to get in trouble, as my closest family members were very trustworthy, and we were so grateful that Mr. Miranda was so interested in helping me with my education. Sometimes I would skip school, but then Mr. Miranda would find out, and that would give him another excuse to take me to his office with the doors closed, and he would scold me. He would tell me that if I skipped school again without telling him where I was or with who, he would send me to another counselor who wouldn't know a word of Spanish or Japanese and that I would surely fail. I was scared since I was new to the country and school and didn't want to disappoint anyone, so I tried not to skip school as much, which in the long run helped me anyway. His typical questions were disturbing, as you will soon understand, and they included, but were not limited to, "You haven't kissed anyone, have you?" I would shyly say, "No, senor." "You won't tell anyone about our special connection, because I'm doing it for your own bright future, right?" I would reply with a shaky voice, "No, sir." Then this question would always leave me confused and questioning myself. "You haven't given your body to anyone, have you?" I felt so awkward because I have no idea what he meant by that. All I knew is that no one else had ever touched me so awkwardly as he had, and I would reply, "No, sir." Then he would say, "Yvonne, you're very special to me, and I couldn't live knowing you did those things without telling me." I couldn't communicate with my teachers due to the language barrier, and my friends were struggling as well. I had enough from this creep. After my first semester, I made a promise that I would study day and night to learn English, and I had a good relationship with Mrs. B, my history teacher, and in broken English, I told her about the situation with Mr. Miranda. She looked surprised, but seemed to have put two and two together. Days passed. Then a typical day after school, Mr. Miranda had me in his office telling me that he was taking me out for a drive in his brand new shiny white Corvette with a bright red interior, and he was going to buy me nice things my family couldn't afford, and that he would be taking me home after them all. I knew then this man was very dangerous, and he was up to no good. I knew my mother had told me going alone with someone in a car wasn't a good thing, and I didn't want to get into trouble. American culture or not, I wasn't going alone with this perv. I said, "I need to use your phone so I can tell my mum where you'll be taking me." Then he said, "No, don't call her. I already told her you'll be with me the rest of the day." I gasped and asked, "The rest of the day?" "What? Don't you trust me? You think I'd ever hurt a beautiful girl like you? What kind of monster do you think I am?" I began to scream and sprinted towards the door, but it was locked. I was cornered like an animal. I continued screaming and throwing whatever I could towards the window to make noise. Then Mr. Miranda said, "There's no one here. It's just you and I." He then went on to say he had done everything for me, and all of my actions towards him were ungrateful, and that I needed to be taught a lesson. He grabbed me and began rubbing his junk against my body and tried to remove my blouse, exposing my flat chest. Meanwhile, I was kicking and screaming. He put his full mouth wide open onto my face like a carp. I had smelled his breath for so many months, but now I was living the nightmare, slobbering all over my face. Then, for a minute, I was terrified of this man's actions. I honestly thought he would swallow my face. You see, I hadn't even had my first kiss yet. I began to latch onto his lower lip and bit as hard as I could. He stumbled back, letting me loose from his tight grip, and I noticed the obvious blood dripping from his mouth. My survival instinct was to continue to scream and for him to unlock the door, when miraculously someone busted the door. It was my beautiful history teacher, Mrs. B, and the campus security guard. I was crying, half-dressed, but I had been rescued. I was reassured by the school officials that I would never see Mr. Miranda again, and that my family was surprised at this, but happy that the monster was gone. If something feels off, listen to your gut, because that could save you from going through what I endured. Don't let anyone steal your innocence, or make you do things you're uncomfortable with. And this being beautiful American culture had nothing to do with the behavior of this awful man. In case you're wondering, I became successful and graciously accepted a fully paid scholarship at a good university and graduated with a master's degree in science. But don't be afraid to speak up. I know it's hard to communicate sensitive stuff to others, but what you have to lose is much more precious and valuable. Believe me, you're worth it. And to all the Mr. Mirandas in the world and the man who smeared my innocence, I have no respect for people like you. And thanks to you, I can scan a creeper and stalker miles away. A few years back, I was a public speaker for a while and had some local success and became well known for motivational speaking. One night, I received a text from a random number. They told me a bunch of information about myself that they shouldn't know. I then texted my closest friend at the time with screenshots of the weird number texting me. Then, the number told me to stop texting my friend, as in they somehow knew I was messaging them. They then messaged him with his full name and address, and told me not to tell someone else about our conversation, and basically blackmailed my friend to stay quiet about it. They went on to claim they weren't trying to threaten me, but were rather really impressed by me and wanted me to join them. I finally just blocked their number and haven't heard anything since, but it was honestly one of the weirdest interactions I've ever had. I am currently studying law, and last semester had a creepy encounter with a boy on campus that still leaves me with the hair on the back of my neck sticking up straight. I've had several strange encounters in my life, and had a hard partying phase for a while that certainly left me in a precarious position. However, never in my life have I felt so uncomfortable and so suspect based off one interaction, especially considering this was on the heels of a time spent in Paris, during which I'm almost certain my friend and I were human trafficking targets at a club one night. It was around President's Day weekend. I live in the graduate resident halls of the university, and it's a school known for its commuting undergraduate population, so the campus was fairly empty for a holiday weekend. It was either Saturday or Sunday, I don't remember which. I was hungover and wanting Starbucks, so I stumbled out of bed, showered, threw on a sweatshirt, leggings, and my long, tan, gorgeous winter wool coat, and head towards the campus dining hall and Starbucks. I had no makeup on, no bra, my hair still slightly damp, but the point is I didn't look cute. As I made my way out of the dorm with my headphones in, I noticed how eerily quiet and empty it was. It was always quiet on the weekends, as it always is in commuter schools or when students live off campus, but it was especially so on this day. My dorm is a short 3-minute walk to the main student center. In between my residence hall at one end and the student center on the other end is a walled straightaway path that connects to all 3 major parking lots. There are benches and tables to sit outside, but people rarely hang out there except to juul or smoke cigarettes. As I approach the path, I notice a guy in a blue hoodie and Adidas track pants loitering back and forth by the sidewalk benches. He was attractive from what I could tell, but looked younger than me, possibly a sophomore or a freshman. I didn't think anything of it at first, as many people from the university and public enter onto campus via this path, except he seemed to be waiting for me to come towards him. And just as I did come within a short distance of him, he began walking towards me. Now, right down the path, head on. So I think perhaps he was heading towards the dorms or parking lot. Unfortunately, this was the narrowest part of the path where it essentially bottlenecks, and instead he came towards me, still making eye contact, and opened his mouth as if to start a conversation. Being a petite female, I politely stopped, as he was now literally blocking my path, and I was caught between the 2 walls. I would have had to physically push past him to continue. I've always been one of those people who gets stopped to be asked directions, or someone who strangers feel comfortable striking up conversations with. I lived in New York City for my undergraduate education, and this happened frequently on subways and on the streets with tourists. Thus, assuming he was asking for directions, as he did look a bit lost and shy, I took an AirPod out and asked, "Can I help you?" He was barely a head taller than me, and had on these red sports goggles that athletes with glasses wear during games, as well as a lime green string bag on his back that had the Navy logo on it. He was unassuming at first, but what he had to say was for sure a first on me. He said in the calmest and lowest toned voice, "Yes, you can help me. I'm sorry to stop you, but you're the most beautiful girl I've seen in a long time, and I had to introduce myself. My name is Nick." And with that, he moved in to about an inch from me and stuck his hand out for me to shake. Caught with my back to the wall and completely off guard, I stepped horizontally closer to the student center end of the path and said something along the lines of, "Oh, well thank you, that's nice." I did not shake his hand, which I found somehow the strangest thing of all. It was not a soft, graceful, nice to meet you gesture, but more a robotic and tense one. He then stepped closer to me and asked me what my name was. Feeling very off-put by how close he was to me, I told him my roommate's name and that it was nice to meet him, but I had to go, and began walking away. At this point, he follows me and grabs me by the shoulder, jerking me back and stops me. "Wait, I saw you come from the graduate hall. Are you a graduate student here? I've never seen you before. Can I have your number? I'd like to see you again." Now this guy's close to me. I'm facing him and was looking him dead into his Adam's apple. I felt as though he was ready to almost pick me up, if that makes any sense. I again step back and say, "Unfortunately, yes, I'm a law student, and that I'm sorry, no, my boyfriend wouldn't like it. And that I said I actually have to go meet him now for breakfast, so goodbye, nice to meet you." With this, he finally lets me leave, and I speed walk to the student center and look over my shoulder, only to see him walking in the opposite direction away from me and towards the parking lot. I was pretty shook up with how aggressive he was, and also that he had essentially watched me leave my dorm. Relieved, I get my food, and then I get in line for Starbucks. Now, I don't have a boyfriend I was meeting, of course, I made that up. I was still alone, but the school had a very open-air dining hall, and the Starbucks is always packed with people. The Starbucks area has glass walls around the entrance so you can see who goes in and leaves the student center. As I'm standing there waiting for my drink, lo and behold, Nick comes strolling in. He spots me and stops dead in his tracks right outside the glass wall, and literally puts his hand on the glass to peer in at me. Now, an older man, presumably a professor, is sitting right by the walls and notices this strange behavior and lowers his newspaper, and looks around following the same eye gaze as Nick. Me and the older man make dead eye contact, and he gives me a strange look. Just as this happens, my drink is ready, so I grab the coffee and turn away. A group of frat boys were walking towards me, so I waved at a random one and pretended to know him as they were deeper into the cafeteria away from Nick. The kid waves back at me and smiles. Hoping to throw Nick off, I look back to where he was standing and he was gone, just gone. The old guy is watching this, clearly confused as hell, and I'm standing there literally shaking. The frat boy then yelled out some random girl's name, guessing I was his blackout hookup from the night before, I bet. So I look around, frozen for a second, and I thought I spotted his bag from behind one of the side pillars of the food buffet, but I didn't waste time finding out. Seeing my chance, I dead sprint out the cafe and back down the path, not stopping until I key into my dorm with my ID. I made it back and threw up in the bathroom. I don't know why this interaction freaked me out so much, or why my body had a physical reaction to it, as I don't have any history of anxiety, nerves, or assault. But what I do know is I have not been able to get this out of my head for a long time. I don't think Nick is or was a student at my school, or if he was put up to it by a frat boy or who knows, but for whatever reason he was hanging out on the path. Quite frankly, it felt like he was waiting for the right person to come along. Lucky for me, I was not the right person and have not run into Nick again, but you can bet every time I'm on that path I walk a little bit faster now, with my head always on a swivel, scanning for that lime green navy string bag. This happened several times at this point, and started 16 months ago when I was cleaning my house around midnight. My husband, who was my boyfriend at the time, worked nights, so I just adjusted to his schedule. I usually kept the blinds open during the day and would go around closing them at night while I tidied up before bed. Our rooms were the last stop on the first night this happened. The curtains and blinds were open as I was sweeping the floor when I felt the sensation of being watched. I looked around me when my eyes focused on this silver sedan parked outside my house, mostly in the grass on my front lawn. Now for context, my bedroom window is about 50 yards from the road in front of my house. It's a small front yard in a pretty densely populated neighborhood. I saw the car before I saw them. I'm not sure, but there was clearly someone sitting in the driver's seat of the car and another person standing about 5 yards from my window, clearly staring at me. The only reason I could see this is because the moon was fairly bright that night. I shrieked and dropped to the floor and crawled to the light switch to turn it off so I couldn't be seen, and called my husband to ask him what I should do. Call the cops? Duh. I did. Of course, by the time they got there, the car was gone. They asked if I could see my security footage, but the footage from the section of time was just gone also. It skipped over the few minutes that they would have been outside. This has happened several times since, and I've completely given up on calling the police, as I feel as if I'm going crazy. I have no proof that this happened, but I would like to get some opinions as to what they may be doing. In the past 16 months, it's happened about 10 times. Sometimes the person is standing in the yard, sometimes they aren't. The car has been different every single time, but the light is always on inside the cabin of the vehicle, but when I go to look, the people inside are never looking where I can see their faces. I'll run to grab my phone to call someone or take a picture, but they'll already be gone. I'm a high school student, and this started in October of 2022 on a Jewish holiday called Yom Kippur, which translates to Day of Repentance. On that day, I went to the town square and just chilled there, met some new people and spoke. And being bored, I chose to go along with my peers in the hopes of meeting someone new. That's when I met a girl called Emma. I met her through mutual friends. She went to a different school in a different town and often doesn't come near mine, as her parents are divorced and her mum has custody of her in her own town, while her dad lives in the same town as me. We spoke a bit. She was shy and socially awkward, and I made up some stuff about my parents wanting me home as it was getting late. Before I left, she asked for my Instagram. I'm fairly active on social media, mostly posting comedic stories, just low-effort jokes that people seem to like. I've noticed that she always views my stories first. Coincidence? Perhaps. But it seems to be seconds after I post them, which I suspect maybe she had notifications on for, but maybe that was just my ego. She responded to a lot of them. She texted in a flirty way, and a lot of heart emojis, and things which were flirty. I got a bit of a creepy vibe when she started sending dirty texts, but I assumed she was just joking. Around December was the first time she tried to meet up with me. She persuaded me, but I didn't crack under peer pressure, so I just kept up with some excuses. Around mid-January, she started texting me on WhatsApp. I never gave her my number, but it was safe to assume one of our mutual friends gave it to her. A bit creepy, but whatever. There were a few phone calls that I missed because I was busy, and she kept texting me inappropriate jokes and I started to ignore her, usually just replying one-word answers. That's when she got angry, but I just hoped shutting her out would be the best way to move forward and to give her a hint. But in February she crossed a line. Out of the blue, she texted me the name of my street and a number to try and throw her off my tail. I just responded with a question mark. She followed up by telling me, "That's where you live, isn't it? Your mate told me, isn't it?" Being freaked out, I left her on red, hoping everything would go away. In the meantime, I tried figuring out how she got the address. I did some online digging, and it was the address that showed after searching for my father's full name, one I'd never told her. She messaged me again a few days later, asking me to let her come over. I told her to leave me alone, and she tried to convince me to take her out on a date. I told her I was gay. She called me every homophobic slur in the book, some of which I'd never even heard. The following morning, she sent me a voice message from a different account, telling me how much she was sorry and that she loves me. I told her again that I was gay, and that I'm just not interested. Then silence. Have I reached peace at last? It's been a few days without hearing from her, and all was good, and I quickly forgot of her existence. But around a week after the whole ordeal, my mum was supposed to drive me to school, but when we got in the car I noticed a tyre was punctured. I had a bad feeling about it. In hindsight, I realized that my dog barked maniacally the night before, but I assumed it was just me being delusional and one of those coincidences. Over the next few days, I had that sinking feeling that something was wrong, like I was being watched every time I was following a routine like going to the gym or walking the dog. I thought I saw her at the mall, but there are only 2 malls in my town, so it's not unlikely. She didn't seem to notice me. A day before my birthday, I got a bouquet of flowers delivered to me along with some balloons and a note just saying, "I love you." No clue who they were from, but it didn't bother me to ask the delivery driver. I just guessed my friends were messing with me. They knew I was on edge about this, but I wasn't sure if it was them. For my birthday day, I went out with my friends to drink. I take an antidepressant, so I often don't go crazy when I drink, only a little drunk. The parents of my friends who live 20 minutes away were on vacation, so he was the host. I posted some pics to my story of us just messing around in his front yard. We made too much noise, and the cops were called, so we had to cut it short. Walking back home, I felt paranoid. I get a bit worried when I drink, but I tried to ignore those thoughts. There was a woman who kept a short distance from behind me, but again, I ignored my gut and assumed it was a coincidence. I stopped on my walk and went into some shrubbery because I just had to bath, and I felt my hair being pulled into a ponytail. It was the lady. She held my hair for me. She told me to sit down and wait before I continued. I listened to her and sat cross-legged with my face looking down. I had my face down out of shame, because I was afraid I'd suddenly puke all over her face if I looked up. She looked familiar. Her voice was oddly familiar too and soothing. She was pretty touchy, but I didn't overthink it as I was out of my senses. That's when she began slowly moving her hand towards my pants and genitals, and I finally told her to stop. I looked her in the face to try and stop her when suddenly, as you probably would have guessed, it was Emma. I tried to get up, but I couldn't. I was too dizzy. She went to grab my shoulder, but I slapped her hand away and told her to leave me alone. She put her hand under my chin and that was it. I don't remember why, but I reflexively punched her. It was just a weak punch, but a punch is a punch. She backed off and I apologized and stumbled away, and I cried on the walk home. I am a pacifist and strictly anti-violence, and I never punched another person. It's against my moral code to punch a woman, but I still felt guilty. I got a message from an unknown number telling me I'm a dead man, but since then, nothing happened. But I'm still paranoid, guilty, and disgusted with myself. I haven't heard from her for 3 months, and honestly I'd like to keep it that way. Shh, look behind you. Did you see her? Oh, she's gone. Okay guys, we're good. I think she's gone now. Look, we better make it clear from the stalker, okay? Just want to say quick thanks to, the members and patrons whose names are on screen. We gotta leave, guys. We gotta leave quick. More links to videos on screen if you want. Just don't let her catch you. Run!